everybody, and welcome back to Enjoy English with Mrs. A. I'm Mrs. A. And before jumping in our training today, let me just tell you, I've been an ESL teacher in Spain since September of 2008. So that's almost 14 years, and I loved just about every second of it. I specialized in ESL exam prep, became an examiner, taught English at the university, wrote books, and ultimately launched this YouTube channel on the very first day of lockdown here in Spain.
So yeah, it's been a ride.
Now I'll be speaking from personal experience today since I've also trained ESL teachers. So if you guys are ESL teachers as well and have had different experiences, by all means, release the Kraken in the comment section. All right, let me start off with common classroom mistakes. And rather than mistakes, let's call them experiences we've learned from. Number one, not adapting your speech to suit the level and proficiency of your students. If you're a teacher, I'm just going to assume you're proficient in the English language. It comes natural to you. But what happens when you have to teach an A1 or A2 group? A huge mistake is going into that classroom and thinking, oh, well, I'm the English speaker, so everyone has to make an effort and follow my lead. If the level of your students is here and the complexity of your speech is somewhere here, you might lose them fairly quickly, especially if you're teaching a large group. You need to meet them halfway, adapt the complexity of your language to suit the level and academic needs of your students. Then, of course, you can increase that level gradually once you got them engaged. So imagine going into your classroom and maybe they'll ask about your weekend. So saying something like, I had to fork out a tenner for a pint, they're not going to get anything. So instead, saying, I had to pay £10 or I paid £10 for a beer, you're giving them the exact same information with words they might recognize. And of course, it's not degrading if you take it down a notch. Number two, cramming in way too much information for an hour worth of class. And of course, expecting the students to remember it. Naturally, I was completely unaware of this on my very first day of class. But years later, when I had to train teachers and ultimately watch them teach, it was a revelation. Because as teachers, we're finally there. We're finally teaching and we want them to enjoy the experience and learn. And we tend to get a little too excited. It is what it is. Years back, I remember watching this adorable teacher filling the whiteboard with all the farm animals and listing them in alphabetical order. I was petrified. Categories are important when you teach. So try introducing a few words such as, let's say, birds, chicken, duck, goose, turkey. And you can play around with all sorts of vocabulary to find out, what does a duck do all day? Can it fly? Can it run?
Does it have superpowers?
Get them to repeat the new words as much as possible. Play around with sentences, questions. Have a little fun with the sounds these birds make in your own language. Integrate something to stimulate visual memory since it's the best we have. If students get around 35% of what you're teaching the first time around, consider yourselves lucky. They're not going to learn words like purchase or resentment right away unless they have a similar equivalent in their language. Even so, if necessity is the mother of learning, repetition is the father. And that's where a good teacher comes in, because your job is basically learning how to dose and juggle the skills. Their reading skills, speaking, writing, reading, adding new vocabulary, adding grammar to that cocktail. This is why it's so important getting to know your students, finding out what they like and what their objectives are. Because students respond better to Taylor Swift is more fashionable than Mrs. A when teaching comparatives. So even if your wiggle room is small, because you have to follow a book or a syllabus Make it fun when you can. Number 3, correcting everything. If we need to adapt the complexity of our language to suit the level and academic needs of our students, the same rule applies when you have to correct them. Whether it's grammar or pronunciation, if their level is on the low side, it's highly unlikely they'll get a word in. If we correct everything, and that is not, my friends, the hill you want to die on. The most important thing at the beginning of their ESL journey is to take flight, to let go of any sort of complex and just speak. We do correct the mistakes they make when they use false friends. See, I'm constipated. Well, constipado in Spanish, you have the flu. So I've heard this more than once in my classroom, and it's funny, but it's something we need to correct because it looks a little too much like their equivalent, and their equivalent is very far in meaning. We correct verbs they use if they don't use the right tense. We make sure to add the plural if they don't. But just as striking and necessary at the very beginning, because what we're after is building that confidence. Number 4, being a thunder thief. As much as possible, classes have to be student-centered, not teacher-centered. So that means students must have an active role at least 60% of the time. That's easy to achieve when you work with small groups. But even if they can't take the stage to speak for a chunk of that time, always make sure the spotlight is on them. If you want to shine as a teacher, well, do a TED Talk, get your own YouTube channel or platform, but keep in mind classroom time has to be about them. Number 5, not doing what you were paid to do. You're not going to have an issue with the students who hired you exclusively for a speaking class. But when it comes to exam prep, you cannot spend that hour and a half speaking about your weekend. Sure, it's fun. Sometimes it happens. But by all means, do not make a habit out of it. Spanish students feel like they have to work for it. And if they're paying for an exam prep class, that's exactly what they're expecting. Structured dialogues following exam guidelines, a listening exercise, reading. Of course, you should send that writing task as homework and take advantage of classroom time to do whatever they cannot do without your guidance. In any case, it's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. So my last tip is always having an ace up your sleeve, a backup lesson right here in case what you spend hours preparing falls flat. Because yes, ladies and gents, it does happen and it sucks, but it is what it is once again. I remember this teacher friend of mine telling how hard she worked to prepare a very interactive and fun and engaging lesson for a bunch of 13-year-olds. And the lesson was about Anne Frank. Long story short, she thought that they were all going to be moved by the lesson, that they were going to be so engaged, but it was all the opposite. In case that happens, better safe than sorry. So I hope you guys enjoyed the training today. And of course, there's more where that came from. Let me know if there's anything else you want to tackle. And thank you so much for joining me today. Bye!